The new leader of the ANC Women's League is Sisisi Tolashe. Now, she was elected by a considerable margin ahead of Bathabile, Dlamini and Thembeka, Mchunu. Tolashe received 1,729 votes to Mchunu's 1,038 and Dlamini's 170 votes. Party President Cyril Ramaphosa announced the result at the League's conference that took place over the weekend in Johannesburg. So for analysis on the 13th African National Congress Women's League National Conference that was held this weekend, we joined via the telephone line by our own political reporter here at the SABC, Samkele Maseko, and political analyst Dr Fikile Vilakazi joining us virtually as well. Dr Vilakazi, good morning, and to you as well, Sam.
Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to Samkele and to viewers at home.
I believe we've just lost him, but we'll get him back shortly. But thanks so much for speaking to us this morning, Dr. Vilakazi. So let's just start with the ANC Women's League before we even get into this weekend's developments and the results. The Women's League, its relevance in 2023, and is it still that strong force for change which it was set out to be?
Sakina, good morning. I mean, it's a very critical question. The Women's League should remain relevant in a sense that we are dealing with a country that has got gender-based violence as the #1 pandemic. You know, so if you look at that, it should. But whether it is, I think it's something that we have been questioning for some time now, mainly because of the manner in which the ANC Women's League has led its own struggles, you know, for women within the African National Congress, but generally for women in society. We have not seen that demonstration of capacity to be able to be a decisive role player when it comes to issues that are facing women in the country, issues that are facing marginalized bodies, you know, of people living with disabilities, LGBTIQ people, and so on, as the Women's League. So in 2023, I think that we are still faced with an ANC Women's League that is struggling to find its role in society, to define itself for the times that we are living in. Rather, you are seeing an ANC Women's League that is highly dependent on the male counterparts within the African National Congress to give it guidance, to give it a thrust and push, you know. And I think without that, as you would have seen the president outlining those 10 key points, I don't know if the ANC Women's League is able to be decisive by themselves in 2023, as it was in the 1940s.
So, and I think it is critical that we address this particular matter because, as you say, not only the pandemic of gender-based violence, but the continued struggle for equality for women across various sectors. This is something that the ANC Women's League would traditionally have championed. But if we just take a case in point, Banyana ahead of the Women's World Cup, which is now underway, and some of their struggles, you know, people would have said a strong ANC Women's League would have been leading the charge in this regard to make sure that the players didn't have to feel like they needed to fight this battle by themselves, just as an example. But then you also listen to some of the commentators and what they've had to say about the ANC Women's League over the years. Professor Shireen Hassim, you know, she's quoted, and I was reading something last night where she was essentially saying, you know, about the ANC Women's League, that, you know, the league has been weakened at various stages over its existence, but also argues that the league is the main gatekeeper for positions in government and parastatal organizations, and you know that is quite key. Someone like Gogo Obri Machitri, for example, saying that at some point the ANC Women's League is patriarchy in a dress. Those are very scathing you know, words against a women's league that has so much to do in contemporary South African society. What's your take on that, and how far the league has come or maybe regressed?
Sakina, sadly so, I think Professor Hassim is correct. She wrote that book that you're referencing now a few years ago, really just looking deeper into the role that the ANC Women's League has played. And I think her analysis is on point. Like many of us have done in society, you find that her findings reveal that the ANC remains pretty much a patriarchal organization, and instead it plays that gatekeeping role. So she's absolutely correct. And Ugogo Oprima Machitri, I've been following his analysis as well, and I think everyone is on point when it comes to that. This is a sad reality. I mean, when you look at issues that are facing women in South Africa, just in terms of leadership, we'll start with political leadership. As I've indicated, you're still seeing that women are following behind deputy positions. They're not able to secure positions of presidencies in various political parties, not just within the ANC. And that's the role that you would want to see the ANC Women's League pushing, but I think they're struggling to do that. Outside of the political sphere, you go into the business sector, you go into the higher, the education sector. I am, within the higher education sector. We are seeing in South Africa, we've got 27 universities, Sakina. And out of those 27 universities, we still have got about at least 5 women who are vice chancellors. And you would have followed, Sakina, that even those women who become vice chancellors, take the case of Professor Umamukhet at UCT. Look at how women in leadership are being lacerated, right, by a patriarchal system. Look at what's happening in UNISA with Professor, the Vice Chancellor Professor at UNISA currently, all those allegations. And I'm not saying that these are not true or whatever. But what happens is that as soon as women climb the ladder of leadership, and they demonstrate ability, something just happens that is patriarchal, that seems to thwart that process. Where is the Women's League? Why are they silent about these issues? Go to the private sector. Chief executive officers who are women are very, very few, right, in South Africa. So those are the issues, in my view, in 2023. If you are an ANC Women's League of a ruling party, you should rally yourself around, right? Issues of land, issues of poverty. If you go to women on farms, Sakina, you will find that the majority of people that are plowing the land, the majority of people that are growing the kinds of crops that are contributing to our economic livelihood as a country, come from the backs and the bodies and the hands of women. However, people that own the means of production in those farms remain predominantly white and male. Where is the Women's League when those things are happening? Especially because the ANC Women's League is part of an organization that has championed policies that are shaping what we now know as the National Democratic Revolution in South Africa, which should center a woman, which should center a what they call a victim in the ANC language, but I would say which should center a survivor, because women are generally survivors, in all spheres of our lives. And I think the narrative and the analysis of gender-based violence that is sitting within the ANC is so limited and so shallow, in that it limits itself to just a woman being beaten by a spouse, being raped, and so on. But it doesn't nuance itself to the kinds of violences that women in leadership are going through in our country. Women in the media, Sakina, there's so much that is happening against our journalists in the media. I've watched a number of incidences where journalists, particularly women journalists, are being attacked, either by analysts like myself, or just by the spaces in which women go. I've seen a number of hectic situations where you will find at the center of providing news to South Africans that you'll find a woman's body running around with a camera and a microphone and so on, right? Making sure that South Africa has the right to know. But how that gets to be treated, I mean, you find situations like the former President Jacob Zuma, who wants to drag a journalist into court, instead of appreciating the role that women are playing in our society. There are many sectors that I can point out. Where is the ANC Women's League in those instances? So for me, those are the key questions I think that the league should ask itself.
And that's an interesting one that you point out, because without necessarily getting to the merits or demerits of the case involving the former president and journalists, it would have been interesting to know what the ANC Women's League stance is on that particular matter. But that's a story for another day. Samkele Maseko, so we've had this weekend the ANC Women's League conference, and of course the elections. But this, seems to have been a consolidation for the Ramaphosa faction once more, because we saw a resounding defeat of the former Women's League President Bathabile Dlamini.
Indeed, Sakina, this was a resounding victory for the Cyril Ramaphosa faction within the African National Congress, solidifying their grip and power over the structures of the ANC ahead of the all-important 2024 general election. But also there were divisions amongst the Ramaphosa camp. We had Kumbudzo Nchaveni, the minister in the presidency, working alongside Marupina Ramokgopa, the second DSG of the ANC, wanting to push Thembeka Mchunu as the president of the ANC Women's League. Hence, you said Thembeka Mchunu getting those 1,038 votes, and Sisisi Tolashe coming in with that 1,772 votes to clinch the presidency of the ANC Women's League. Interesting, Sisisi Tolashe comes from the infamous Chris Hani region of the ANC, which houses the Chris Hani cabal, which is Montli Kungubele, Kwedamantashe, and Enoch Godongwane. Also, the chairperson of the ANC of the Eastern Cape, Oscar Mabuyane, hails from that particular part of the country. But just to differ with the analyst and not only point to the negatives of the Women's League, we've got to give Bathabile Dlamini credit on how she was able to have a campaigning ANC Women's League for the African National Congress, to open up the membership of the ANC Women's League to the LGBTQI community. They had their Molo Makulane campaign, wherever in the rural areas, in the townships, wherever someone had a bereavement or there was a problem within the area, you would see the blouses of the ANC Women's League. So Bathabile Dlamini pretty much tried to revive an ANC Women's League that had diminished in its stature and its public perception in the tenure of Angie Motshekga, who lost out against Bathabile Dlamini in 2015. Which of the campaigns of the ANC Women's League can you, Sakina, remember between 2007 going towards 2015, where you had Angie Motshekga at the helm of the ANC Women's League? You had the likes of Sisisi Tolashe, who is a former Secretary General of the ANC Women's League, by the way, just like Bathabile Dlamini is also a former Secretary General of the ANC Women's League. So during the different epochs and the eras of the ANC Women's League, they've gone through different epochs and different eras where the Women's League stature in society had pretty much diminished, gone under the radar. But Bathabile Dlamini did not assist herself as the president of the ANC Women's League, because she was the one who was continuously shrouded in dark clouds, in allegations of wrongdoing, perjury. He had allegations of her being involved in tender irregularities when it comes to the SASSA payment of grants when she was still the Minister of Social Development, which pretty much diminished the work she was doing organizationally as president of the ANC Women's League. And their biggest fault was that they were too inward-looking and not championing the issues of women within society, ordinary women in the corporate sector who are being diminished by men, women in various sectors of society, like in the universities, like Professor Mamkheti. The Women's League has been very quiet, but on the contrary, they were out vociferously defending Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, looking into the inward factional battles of the ANC rather than societal issues. You never saw the ANC Women's League coming out and defending Advocate Thuli Matonzela.
So these are some of the questions that many are grappling with as it comes to the ANC Women's League and its relevance in contemporary society. But also, just Samkele, before I get back to Dr. Vilakazi, with regard to the divisions that you point out, is this just democracy at work, or is there an actual split there with regard to what would be seen as the Ramaphosa faction within the Women's League?
The reality of it, Sakina, is that in every conference of the ANC, there's always realignments and new alignments. During discussions and developments, there are changes. And the reality of it is that the President Cyril Ramaphosa has clinched the second term. He will probably get, if the ANC wins 2024 elections, get a second term as President of the Republic. He's already gotten a second term as President of the African National Congress. Those whom are in the ANC are now looking into the future. There is an intergenerational battle raging within the African National Congress. You must not undermine the troika of Mduduzi Manana, Stelanta Beni Abrahams, and Fikile Mbalula. That particular generation was deputy ministers during the era of former President Jacob Zuma. Some of them graduated to be ministers in the era of President Ramaphosa and President Zuma, with Mbalula being a minister of sports and recreation. But it tells you that this generation that came in as the immediate graduates of the ANC Youth League post-2012 and post-Polokwane as deputy ministers and as ministers is ultimately saying that it is their time to become the leaders of the African National Congress now. That would be Stella Abrahams. That would be Fikile Mbalulas, Mtutuz Mananas. That would be the likes of Kusela Tiko, who was very instrumental in the election of Sisisi Tolashe as the president of the ANC Women's League against a younger generation like Kumbudzo Ntavini, like Mahupino Ramokhupa, who've just come into the fore. That particular generation is fighting against an older generation in the ANC youth, the likes of Zizi Godwa, whom are saying that post-Cyril Ramaphosa, the ANC must take a different shape in the form that their specific generation that led the ANC Youth League going towards Polokwane as Secretary General must now be at the forefront of the leadership of the ANC at a national level, which brings into question and the virtue that it was no surprise where you had Fikile Mbalula becoming the Secretary General, and you also saw the likes of Oscar Mabuyane contesting to be the Deputy President of the ANC against an older generation of Cyril Ramaphosa and Paul Mashatile.
Well, I'm loath to say we are out of time, but we'll definitely make time to come back to this discussion. But thanks so much, for that initial discussion regarding the weekend's developments in the ANC Women's League. Our political reporter here at the SABC, Samkele Maseko, and political analyst, Dr. Fikile Vilakazi, speaking about the 13th African National Congress Women's League National Conference.